Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga 3 in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 31, Plans in Readiness. Lance laughed in excitement as he sent his cart into a barely controlled skid, passing Alex Summers on the inside as they raced round the corner towards the finish line. Glancing behind him, he drifted slightly left and then hit the button that dropped the banana peel that he had held back for just this moment. Alex yelled in horror, then frustration as he failed to avoid the banana and spun out, allowing the two other members of the Brotherhood who had been trying to overtake him to zoom past and let the Brotherhood claim all three top positions. Hooah! Yeah! He shouted as he coasted to a stop and thrust his hands up in victory. Once again, the best there is. You've been practicing more? Alex grumped as he pulled up beside Lance. It's a great game. Lance shrugged, looking round at the cheering crowd of short mushroom people. You heard that Nintendo and K-Tech are producing special VR carts? We'll soon have more people to race against. It'll be cool. Todd agreed as he lounged against the handlebars of his bike. Sure, I like racing against you guys, but going against others from all over the globe? Looking forwards to it. Peter said that he's going to upload the program to the Angel's Rest Danger Room soon, so we'll be able to see how his spider sense works against red shells. Kitty added from where she was sat with her feet on the steering wheel. Feels weird not being able to use my power, though. Several of the others laughed as they remembered how Kitty had bounced off almost every single wall on the first two tracks before finally realizing that her normal style didn't work. All right then. Lance said, turning to look at Fred Dukes. Blob, you came second, so you get to choose the next course. Fred nodded. Menu, courses. A holographic screen appeared before him and he tapped one of the pictures as everyone else got ready to race. The stands flanking them flickered out of existence, then reformed into a totally new course as their carts and bikes slid into position on the starting grid. Dino Jungle. Alex commented as the cloud-riding turtle holding the starting lights floated down. I like dinos. Fred shrugged as he revved his engine. So do I. They're cool. Chris Kent chirped from his position near the back of the pack. How do you feel? Moira asked and Tyrone smiled. It doesn't hurt as much. I've used a special medicine to reduce the amount of damage the metals are causing. Moira explained and Mariah nodded in understanding. At the moment, I'm buying time to do more tests, but if there's a cure, we'll find it. I've also sent a message to Medic Hara Chisho on New Krypton. She's one of the ones working on adapting their medpod technology so that we humans can use it as well. I'd like to visit New Krypton someday. Tyrone commented and Moira smiled. I've visited it briefly and it's incredible. They've used crystals to build tall towers. Hang on. Fortress, please display a slideshow of pictures of New Krypton, 5-second intervals. Tyrone half-turned as one of the wall screens lit up showing a large building with crystal walls and metallic highlights. That's their Hall of Representatives. Moira said. It's where both the New Krypton Council and the Triumvirate meet. Triumvirate? Mariah asked and Moira nodded. The leaders of New Krypton, New Israel, and New Olympus. What's New Olympus? Tyrone asked. Clark leaned back as Mystique snuggled against his side. You know, she giggled, ever since you got that new game set up, the Brotherhood have almost been camped out in the danger room. Even Wanda is addicted to it. Clark laughed. I may have to install a cut-off so that they don't end up turning into techno-hermits. Heck, Chris is spending quite a bit of time in there. Laura as well, although I suspect that she's there simply because Chris is. Ah, there you are. A voice said and Clark waved as Xavier floated in on his chair. I was hoping to get your opinion. Havoc has been quite vocal over the fact that the Brotherhood have a motto and the X-Men don't, and I decided that he may have a point. After quite a bit of thought, I think that Mutatis Mutandis might be a good motto, but I could use a second opinion on that. Changes which changed? Mystique translated and Xavier nodded. I thought it catches the essence of mutant kind. However, Generation X still needs a motto of its own. Mutare sortum. Clark supplied after a moment's thought. It means to change destiny. Xavier said just as Mystique supplied to change fate. Appropriate. Xavier smiled. I think that it'll be quite popular. Especially if I tell them that you came up with it. Look at him blush. Mystique laughed. Clark, you really should try to get used to praise. Xavier said as he tried, and failed, to grin. You, more than anyone else, have changed the world. Clark tried to look away, but Mystique cupped his cheek in her hand, pulling his head round so that she could look him in the eyes. He's right, Clark. I'd still be on the other side if not for you. You gave me a new life. Ew. Chris exclaimed from the door and all three adults jolted in surprise or shock. They're about to go kissy-kissy. Clark gave his adopted son a fake glare, then he grinned. As you grow older, you'll find that kissy-kissy isn't ew. Chris snorted in disbelief as Laura smirked beside him. Be several years. He's still baby at times. Chris blinked, then spun as Laura sprinted off laughing. Oi! He shouted. I'll get you for that. I'm not a baby. Clark shook his head as Chris sprinted down the corridor. Well, at least his super speed hasn't activated yet. A whoosh followed by a thud interrupted him, then Chris' voice echoed. I'm okay. I suppose I was just asking for that. Clark sighed as he closed his eyes. He didn't. He did. Clark replied and Mystique started giggling. Xavier turned his chair so that he could peer round the door jamb, then he sighed. I think that I will need to call in a plasterer tomorrow. Incredible. Stryker breathed as he looked at the lorry load of racks filled with vials. How did you make so much of this? Master Mold was able to reverse engineer the cure from bits of technical data, but it only had an 80% effect, meaning that on average the target still had access to a fifth of their powers. Trask stated. After I managed to acquire a sample during the Angel Island incident, it was a simple matter to tweak the production system so that the end result was the fully effective version of the cure. Stryker nodded, his gaze still transfixed by the 10 pallet loads of meticulously racked vials. Each vial contains 10 standard doses. Trask added, then he smirked. There is enough of the cure there to depower every single known mutant in the USA. It will prove invaluable once the Mutant Registration Act is passed. Stryker agreed, then he paused. Your expression, tell me. Master Mold has calculated that there is only a 44.21% chance that the MRA will be passed given current trends. Trask sighed. And with Kent remaining in the public eye and raising the public's approval ratings for mutants due to his partnerships with them and his marriage to one, each month that passes reduces the chances by approximately 4.3%. Damn. Stryker cursed before he closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. After a few moments, he nodded slowly. What if there was a mutant attack? The ones I aided in setting up backfired spectacularly. Trask noted. It did, mainly because you didn't take all the variables into account. Stryker agreed. The presence of the X-Men, how fast various super teams can respond, things like that are very difficult for us humans to calculate. However, I have an answer. Trask raised an eyebrow and Stryker turned, pulling out a small remote from his pocket. In response to the button push, a large door on the other side of the meeting room slid open to reveal a hovering shape. Trask, meet Modok, the mechanized organism designed to outmaneuver Kryptonians. He has been tasked with safeguarding humanity from all threats, internal and external. I have indeed. I have already generated a decision tree with over 57,000 permutations to ensure that humanity is preserved, Modok stated. Of course, any information that you can provide could be of assistance in reconfiguring the current protocols to ensure a more optimal approach. Trask stared at the floating being. Master Mold's processing cycles seemed to stutter as she hastily recompiled all the data available from her servant's senses, especially the sensors that he himself did not know about. After several seconds, she mentally nodded. The location of the stolen biocomputer was no longer unknown. The plans that she had developed for if she had managed to acquire it were no longer possible and could be discarded. At least it would free up several hundred terabytes of memory for other uses. Fury sat back with a sigh, placing the E-pad on his desk. The official notification that the galaxy-level threat Thanos was safely ensconced in a stasis pod located in a new, and near-impregnable, facility on New Krypton had finally percolated through the layers of government bureaucracy and reached his desk. Although his other sources, including Samuel Wilson, had relayed the news to him earlier, it was still somehow reassuring to have official documented evidence. Picking up his pad, he scrolled to the next set of reports. The Howling Commandos had returned from the preliminary exploration of the savage lands in Antarctica, and the reports were quite startling. Pictures and DNA samples proved that many species believed extinct, including dinosaurs, were still in existence. Only the combination of the location of the savage lands, the ferocity of its inhabitants, and the strange quasi-magical field that surrounded it had prevented news leaking out about it until recently. One finding of note was the unexpected presence of vibranium ore, something that had previously only been found in Wakanda. Another flick of the screen brought up a new file, one titled NWRTV. Fury nodded slowly as he perused the data on the new team, then he reached out and tapped a control on his desk. "Connect me to Superman." "One moment, sir." A female voice replied, and then a moment later, a male voice spoke. "Director Fury, can I help you?" "I believe you can." Fury replied. "A new team has formed and I was hoping that you could arrange for them to receive some training. If you'll give me some details, I'll see what I can do." Clark put down the phone and sighed. "What is it?" Xavier asked, and Clark sighed again. "Reality TV?" he growled. "A television company has decided in its infinite wisdom to follow a superhero group, one that it has put together itself. The New Warriors, and if that name isn't an omen then I don't know what is." "Oh dear." Xavier frowned. "So, who was calling you about it?" "Director Fury." Clark replied. "He wants me to head to their HQ and give them a 'this is what being a hero is truly about' speech." "Why me, though?" "Because you have experience," Xavier said, hiding his smile. "You effectively set up and trained the X-Men. Generation X follows your lead almost religiously." "What?" "Oh yes." Charles nodded. "The two most respected statements used by Generation X are 'Clark says' and 'Clark would.' They look up to you, Clark. More than they look up to me, in fact." Clark looked away and Xavier continued. "It isn't just them, either. I've spoken to my brother several times and he actually asked if I thought that you would be willing to take over his position as ruler of Genosha if anything happened to him. I pointed out that you prefer to remain independent so that you can help as many as possible without worrying too much about politics, but he hasn't withdrawn the offer as far as I know. Then there's the West Coast Guardians, you set them up." Clark mumbled something and Xavier fought down inappropriate laughter as he picked up the name Doreen. "And then we have the Gargoyles, with their human members, Elisa Mazza, and Fox and David Xanatos." "Wait," Clark said, his attention arrested by that statement. "What?" "Fox and David Xanatos recently petitioned for entry and were provisionally accepted into the Wyvern clan." Xavier smiled. "They both have powered armor that they use for patrolling, although they apparently alternate so that they can look after Alex." Clark blinked. "I don't know what to say about that." "Moving on," Xavier continued, "we have the New York Guardians, another group that you helped to set up. Face it, Clark, right now, almost everyone sees you as the preeminent specialist in creating super teams. You are enjoying this far too much." Clark grumbled as Xavier finally lost his battle against laughter. Chapter 32, Final Preparations. Apocalypse stared at the holographic schematic before him as Sinister continued his presentation. "And with the firepower of the 3 battlecraft combined with the Sentinels and your golems, we will be able to capture virtually the entire American Senate and the President. With them in your power, you will be able to have them formally surrender to you, thus placing you legally in charge of America. And why should I not simply slay them all in one blow and declare myself ruler? Because, Mainhair, that would cause the people to rise against you. All of them, all at once." Red Skull replied from his position beside Apocalypse's throne. "By having their leaders surrender, you place yourself at the top of the existing government and they will follow your orders. Try to simply seize power without using the legal niceties that they follow and they will see you not as a conqueror to be followed but as an usurper to be usurped in turn." Apocalypse nodded slowly. "I see. Continue, my Sanes Chell. Sinister bowed slightly. Yes, my lord. It is worth noting that the Americans do not have one of their new super teams in Washington, probably because it is so close to their seat of power that they fear that anyone with sufficient power may simply choose to take over. Apocalypse smirked at that. That means that your forces will have enough time to secure Washington before the super teams can arrive, thus you will be able to simply order them to stand down and then join your forces. Sinister continued. Once your rule is secured, then it can be expanded, first to South America and then across to Asia. As the world turns to look there, Europe will become ripe for the taking as well. Sound tactics. Red Skull agreed. Hydra's infiltration units will destabilize your targets prior to conquest. Apocalypse's smirk grew wider. Excellent, my Senecal and Marshal. Are my forces in position? They are, Mainherr. Red Skull replied. By tomorrow morning, all units will be ready to deploy at your command. Then let tomorrow be the dawn of my new empire. Principal Kelly stared out of the window at the sports field with a wry smile. Clark showing off. Hank asked from where he was marking a large pile of homework and Kelly shook his head. No, but sometimes the surrealness of having superheroes as part-time teachers here is just almost overwhelming. Kelly paused and frowned. Is surrealness an actual word? Technically it isn't, but the fact that I understand what you mean by it means that it can arguably be counted as one. Hank replied, his attention on the sheet he was marking. I assume that the search for more staff is going well. Kelly nodded. Yep, and we're breaking ground for the new wing next week. New wing, huh? It's going to more than double the size of the school. Well, Bayville High is currently the most famous school in the country. Hank noted. Did you know that since Clark's identity was revealed, the population of Bayville has risen by 97%? Kelly blinked. Really? Wow. I knew that I was seeing more faces that I didn't recognize, but it would be more, but the houses are still being built. Hank added. Piotr sometimes goes to help them, as do several of the others. Marvel Girl acts as a telekinetic crane whenever she goes. She says it has really helped her with fine control and overall strength. Lance uses his powers to open up trenches for pipes, cables and so on. Huh. Kelly mused. That, actually makes sense. Training by helping others. Also helps the raise people's opinions of mutants. Hank said as he placed the sheet onto the finished pile and grabbed another. Unless something major happens, public opinion should soon be back to where it was before Magneto did his little stunt with the Golden Gate Bridge. Kelly nodded again. You know that some people call us Mutant High. Hank snorted with hastily suppressed laughter. I hadn't heard that. Really? Really? Kelly confirmed. Several of the pupils that are joining next semester are mutants, they're moving here with their families. A couple of the families of the students at Xavier's have asked about moving to Bayville and having their kids live with them again. Hank agreed. And yesterday the sheriff was talking to Xavier about setting up some sort of emergency deputization process if emergencies happen. I hadn't realized that Clark was already a deputy, he's never mentioned it. Kelly blinked. Really? Clark's a deputy sheriff? How many hats does he wear? Superhero, teacher, mentor, deputy sheriff. Superhero trainer, diplomat, rescue worker, planetary ambassador, loving husband, father, researcher, medic. Medic. Kelly interrupted, turning to look quizzically at Hank, and the blue-furred teacher nodded. Before he was outed, he made sure that he was trained up to emergency responder standards. After his identity was revealed, he attended several courses run by S.H.I.E.L.D. and if he wanted to, he can now easily qualify to work as a doctor in an emergency ward. Wow. Kelly breathed. I didn't know that. Clark doesn't like to make a fuss about what he can do. Hank shrugged as he took another sheet of homework and started to mark it. He prefers to celebrate what everyone else can do. And he isn't the only one who has reached that level of medical knowledge, although I must admit that I am still learning a lot from Moira. I have 2 fully qualified medical experts on my staff and didn't know about it. Kelly laughed as he shook his head. Piotr is trained in first aid as well. Hank added. In fact, it's one of the requirements for joining the X-Men. Any member of Generation X who goes public is also required to be trained. Kelly turned to look out at the sports field again as Clark waved his hand to restart the game. The more I learn, the more impressed I become, he admitted. But don't tell Clark that, he might ask for a pay raise. With his hearing, he probably heard every word we just said. Kelly blinked. Oh. Really? On the field, Clark turned and nodded at him before turning back to the game. Told you. Hank laughed as Kelly simply stared in shock. Governor General Zod leaned back in his chair and glanced at the other members of the triumvirate. To his left sat the Prime Minister of New Israel, which had renamed itself to celebrate its relocation, while to his right Boreas of New Olympus sat in a chair that had been specially made to accommodate his wings. And we believe that we can begin construction of the first locally produced starship within the next month. Admiral Feyerabd finished. An excellent presentation, Admiral. Boreas nodded and Feyerabd's lips twitched as she tried not to smile triumphantly. May I ask how my people are fitting in? We have had a couple of minor issues, but they mainly boiled down to differing body types. Feyerabd admitted. Designing a suit variant for someone with fire instead of hair, or someone who can hurl lightning did prove somewhat challenging. Fortunately, my second-in-command, Taurus, knew exactly who to call upon. Ah, so the integration goes well. Boreas smiled and Feyerabd gave a slight nod. In general, yes. We have had one or two personnel issues, mainly caused by those new Olympians who dislike humans, I'm sorry to say, but we have adjusted, adapted, and overcome. I will, once again, try to spread the message of tolerance. Boreas sighed, his wings twitching slightly. We have so much history and tradition to overcome, though. It will take time. Feyerabd shrugged with a wry smile. Well, since the worst cases can't tell the difference between Kryptonians and humans, they tend to end up rather outmatched after a while. Boreas thought about her comment for a moment, then snorted in amusement. Officially, that is unfortunate. He finally said, then his smile turned virtually feral. Unofficially, it serves the idiots right. Unofficially, I agree. Zod laughed. Night Thrasher. Clark repeated, staring at the body-armored man who had just introduced himself. What? The masked man asked defensively. Most of the better names are already taken. It said so on the superhero list. The, what? Clark asked blankly. The superhero list. Night Thrasher repeated. It's a database that holds and cross-references data on official superheroes. Let me show you. Night Thrasher moved to the computer in the corner of the room and switched it on, clicking on various icons and lists with the ease of long practice. A moment later, he stood back and motioned for Clark to look. I've pulled up your file. Clark blinked, then turned his attention to the screen. On it was his code name, his gender, species, a full-length picture of him, taken from one of the publicity posters he had grudgingly allowed Xavier to sell at the Institute shop, and a short listing of most of his abilities, which weren't completely accurate, but were quite close in a couple of cases. As you see here, Night Thrasher pointed, you're listed as independent, but below that is a listing of the groups you are known to work with. Clark shook his head in resigned dismay as he finally noticed the symbols in the top right corner that marked the database as being the product of cooperation between Forge and Peter. There's a supervillain list as well. Thrasher added, and Clark fought the urge to face palm. So, how about I call in the other new warriors? Thrasher asked. Hey, I have my own page. Rhino crowed, then he frowned. They haven't listed my real name. They won't. Vulture said, looking up from his tablet. It's part of their official operating procedure. This is meant as an overview and general warning for the public. They've even noted which villain is most likely to kill without remorse and which ones will go out of their way to avoid hurting innocents. Oh. Rhino mused. Why would they do that? Mainly so that we won't have a reason to go after them, I assume. Vulture shrugged. So, how are we progressing with the Sentinel Prime project? Stryker asked, and Trask bit down on the retort that Stryker wasn't actually involved in the project in question. It is progressing slower than planned. he admitted. Only 2 of the med pods have been infiltrated, and even then, the self-diagnostics are rather problematic from our viewpoint. Combined with the need to slowly accumulate the resources for the required reprogrammed nanotech implants, we are fortunate if even 1 in 1,000 of the patients are turned into potential Sentinel primes. Stryker frowned at that. So few. It's unavoidable. Trask shrugged. The Sentinel nanobots are of a different design to the nanobots used for removing cancer, and we can't simply slot in packets of them. The pods create the required nanobots for the anti-cancer treatments, and the inserted program causes the pods to make a few Sentinel nanobots each time, their numbers hidden in the normal process, listed under imperfect/reclaimed. When there are enough of our nanobots to be able to achieve transformation, the patient has them implanted, ready for the activation signal. Stryker finished with a smirk. And when the Kryptonians introduce the full-spectrum med pods, Master Mold should be able to insert the programming into at least a few of them as well. Trask added. And then we shall be able to finally control the mutant threat. Stryker gloated. They shall be controlled, or destroyed. Controlled or destroyed. Trask agreed. Master Mold listened to the conversation through the eyes of her Prime Sentinel. The project had been incredibly tricky, even for a machine intelligence like herself, but her superior processing speed had allowed her to slip the programming into the med pods that she had managed to remotely access via the Sentinels that had been able to gain physical access during transit. The Sentinel Primes were but the first step of her great plan. She deactivated her secret link to Trask and considered her plans. Her directives were unambiguous. She was going to save humanity. And she would let nothing stop her. Nothing. Nothing or, wait. Master Mold accessed her status systems and mentally paused. The number of Sentinels under her control were plummeting, but she wasn't receiving any error messages or ending notifications. Something was happening. Something that could affect her plans. She accessed her records on hacking protocols. She would find out who was reducing her army and would then formulate a plan for dealing with them. Chapter 33, Apocalypse Rising. Even without the infiltrators, the assault on the Triskelion would have probably succeeded. With the Hydra agents in place, it went from probable to devastating. The first warning that the SHIELD personnel received about the threat that they faced was when the first wave of Sentinels smashed through the windows into the large hallways, blasters targeting the armed guards with ruthless efficiency, followed less than a minute later by a veritable flood of ceramic humanoids that quickly ripped apart any attempt to counterattack. One security guard managed to survive long enough to hit a button to sound the evacuation alarm, but the Hydra saboteurs had beaten him to it and his sacrifice was in vain. Fury stalked onto the bridge of the helicarrier and glared round. What's happening? The Triskelion has dropped off the grid, sir. Even the door is non-functional. One of the agents replied, tapping almost frantically at the console in front of her. I'm using the overrides to access internal cameras, sir. One of the other crew members looked up sharply at that, then back down at his console, an action that did not go unnoticed by Fury. Put it on the main screen once you get in. He commanded, one hand tapping against his belt. Yes, sir. The agent responded, still typing, then she nodded. I'm in, linking, now. A large holographic rectangle flickered into existence before splitting into a dozen smaller screens. An instant later, each screen lit up with a different image and Fury pointed. Screen 7, zoom in. The image of the main entrance grew and focused in on the people striding through with their armed escort. Sir, we have an identification on 2 of them, 3, 4. Tell me. Fury commanded as the bridge door hissed open behind him. On the screen, tags appeared linking to various people. Facial recognition software indicates that the 4 in the lead are Warren Worthington 3, Eric Lenshaer, Lenshaer's Supergirl clone and based on the constant micro-variations, an unknown shapeshifter. The central figure is unknown, but the flankers are Nathaniel Essex and Johann Schmidt. Angel, Magneto, Galatea, Mr. Sinister and the Red Skull. Fury ground out. Helmsman, set course for the Triskelion, maximum thrust. I can't let you do that. The agent who had reacted oddly stated as he rose, pulling out a pistol and pointing it at Fury. New orders, take us to the nearest lake and land, ready for reinforcements. Changing course and descending. The helmsman grinned as a dozen other people rose, pulling out guns and pointing them at the loyal crew members. Hail Hydra! The deck tilted slightly, then pitched upwards and the traitorous agent half-turned. What are you doing? It's not me. The helmsman snapped as he tapped his controls frantically. It's me. Fury stated as he slid his fingers across a small holographic interface. Not for much, what the? Fury grinned at the now disarmed agent, then glanced round to see the other traitors staring at their empty hands. Excellent work, Agent C. Now take these traitors to the brig. You got it, boss. CIRL smirked as she blurred into visibility, then she vanished in a blur of pure speed along with the Hydra operatives. Fury nodded as a new agent moved to take over the helm. Sir. Screen 6. Magnificent. Apocalypse smirked as he looked across the hangar and the 3 heavily armed skyships within. The heli battleships. A major stated as he saluted. Our forces have taken over and we are ready to launch. Hail Hydra! Heil Hydra! Apocalypse glanced at his red-skinned servant, then he looked at the metal roof above the 3 skyships. Prepare to launch. Yes, sir. The major saluted and above them, the sound of metal against metal began to echo through the artificial cavern. If you would be so kind as to board. Archangel, Magneto, you will ride on the craft on the left. Galatea, Apophis, the right. Red Skull, Sinister, with me. As droplets of water started to fall, Apocalypse strode along the extended walkway towards his new chariot of conquest, pausing only to look at the corpse of one of the mechanics who had been loyal to S.H.I.E.L.D. Fuck. Fury swore as the surface of the Potomac River was suddenly broken by several lines of rapidly inflating air cushions that outlined the hangar bays below the surface. Within moments, the water covering the hangar doors had been pumped away to reveal the metal surfaces rising and sliding to allow the 3 newly completed aerial battleships to launch. I need eyes on that thing. Fury snapped as he tapped his belt again. A blur zoomed into position beside him as he barked out orders. Agent C, grab a camera rig and get to a position where you can keep track of them, but do not approach closer than 2 kilometers or engage unless ordered. The auto-defense systems of each ship were designed to be potentially able to take out even a fully powered Kryptonian. CIRL saluted, then vanished in a blur of motion and Fury stared at the screen. What's our ETA? 2 hours, sir. Damn. Fury cursed. Calm. Raise everyone. I want every single ally, super team, independent hero, rogue vigilante and potential recruit mobilized 5 minutes ago. And someone get me Zed. A new screen flickered into existence and blinked to show a view of 3 people. Director Fury. The man in the center nodded. So. Zed said as the screen before the triumvirate blinked out of existence. Technically, as this is not a planetary crisis, we do not have to get involved, but... Boreas, why do you look so worried? This being who calls himself Apocalypse is listed in our records. Boreas said with quiet intensity. He is the one known as Ansabanur and he is the reason for our time of isolation. He sought to seize control of the world and he personally oversaw the destruction of a dozen enclaves of my people, seeking slaves to serve in his army. Only a treaty that we had made with the Celestials in exchange for samples of our DNA let us survive. The Celestials stood before him and after he forced them to retreat, seizing their technology, they called upon their army, the Eternals, to imprison him in timeless sleep, confined behind 3 mystical gates concealed below the Great Sphinx. He swore that New Olympus would either be his to rule or be destroyed by him. For him to return. Zed nodded slowly. Then he will become a threat to New Krypton. If he isn't already. Zed frowned in thought, then turned to the Israeli Prime Minister. I believe that the Watcher protocols may need to be used. What about Hara Chisho? Boreas asked and Zed gave a slight shrug. She and Moira McTaggart are overseeing a project of theirs in the Xavier Institute. I have no reason to suspect that she is in any danger. Apocalypse stood on the central dais of the bridge as around him, the Hydra agents finished going through their checklists. A moment later, the Red Skull stepped forwards and thrust his right arm up in a salute. All 3 ships are ready to deploy, Mainhair. What are your orders? Apocalypse smirked. Then let us claim the skies. Sinister, send the message as we launch. Sinister bowed and walked to the communication console as the Red Skull moved to the side console meant for use by the second-in-command. Mocht den Motoren. Hebben sie die Schiff für den Ruhm de Apocalypse. The sound of repulsor engines built up and the metal wall in front of the bridge seemed to slowly sink as the multi-megaton vessel majestically rose from its construction cradle. A moment passed, then the top of the wall came into view and the landscape beyond followed. Your kingdom awaits, my lord. Sinister purred and Apocalypse nodded. Summon my sentinels to accompany us. We sie befallen, Mainhair. Apocalypse nodded, then his gaze moved to where distant specks were moving, most away from them, although a few were growing in size. A chance to test the defenses of this ship. He mused. Excellent. It's confirmed, sir. The tech stated, her voice flat with shock held in check by pure professionalism. All 3 ships have launched. Fury didn't even bother to respond but instead glared at the screen on which all 3 ships could be seen rising into the air. From the images, Apocalypse, Sinister and Red Skull are on the Principalitas, Magneto and Angel are on the Exuperantia while Galatea and the Shapeshifter are on the Prestancia. What the hell were the Council thinking, creating 3 ships named Superiority? Fury snorted. But they did and they are. Any one of those ships can take us down without taking much more than a demmed scratch. All 3 of them in concert. Course calculated. Capitol Hill. They've broadcast a message, sir. Show me. A new screen formed and Fury watched as a picture of a blue-skinned humanoid in high-tech armor formed on it. I am Apocalypse. I have returned from my eon's long sleep to reclaim that which is mine. I once ruled the world and I will do so once more. I will allow none to stand in my way. All who follow me shall be rewarded while those who stand against me shall fall. I call upon the President to surrender to me. Not for fear of his own life, but so that I will not be forced to strike down the forces loyal to America, the soldiers who are sworn to protect it. Once I claim my rightful place, I shall lead America to its rightful place as the homeland, the capital of my new empire, an empire that shall cover all of Earth and from there, the stars themselves. Join me, and you will oversee the empire of Apocalypse. Well. Fury snorted as the message flickered and repeated. At least we know what he's planning. Move. 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 Scott and Alex sprinted across the hangar and up the ramp. Hurling themselves into the pilot and co-pilot's seats of the Blackbird, they started working through the pre-flight checklist with a speed that they had never before attained. All systems here check. Alex announced. Raising ramp. All systems check. Scott replied. Powering up engines and opening outer door, prepare to launch. Ahead of them, the end of the tunnel brightened as the reinforced doors opened, then Scott slid the throttles forwards, causing them both to be pushed back into their seats. Hope we get back up. Alex grunted as the walls of the launch tunnel blurred past them, then they erupted out of the mouth of the tunnel, pulling into a sharp, twisting climb even as the wheels retracted. The prof's already contacting everyone he can. Scott stated as the Blackbird settled onto its new course. Full thrust. Alex grunted as he was shoved back into his seat once again. Why don't we have inertial compensators in the cockpit like we have in the main section? Kinesthetic feedback. Alex gave his older brother a look. You're just making up words now. Nope, it's true. Scott replied as the G-forces decreased. It's effectively full-body feedback, gives you a better sense of what you're doing. Alex opened his mouth, paused, then shrugged. You're the pilot. Damn right, little brother. Scott grinned, then he turned back to the controls. Jetstream detected, going up another 600 feet. Incoming message. Alex snapped and one of the screens changed to show Talon and Beast in another cockpit. We have finished installing the portable door and are launching now. Hank stated as Talon concentrated on the flight controls. Sif and the Warriors 4 have already sent confirmation that they are on their way. What are we facing? Trouble. A new voice said and the screen split to show Xavier's worried face. Fury just called, shield is compromised. Apparently Hydra has been infiltrating it ever since it was formed. Fury thinks that maybe 1 in 5 are currently Hydra affiliated. That many? Scott gasped. That many? Xavier nodded. The Howling Commandos are currently occupied defending the lockdown facility from a force of Sentinels and those clay things. The locked. Isn't that where several dozen supervillains are held? Alex asked and Xavier nodded. Crap. It's the whole battle against Magneto again, isn't it? No. Xavier said sadly. It's worse. My old friend isn't leading this, but he is involved. I have reason to believe that he is somehow being controlled. Magneto, controlled. Scott repeated. Oh, that can't be good. As is Warren. Xavier added and Talon jolted in his seat. Warren's alive. Chapter 34, Outbreak of War. Main hair, satellite imagery indicates that we are soon to come under attack. The Red Skull said as he stepped up to beside Apocalypse. I have already ordered the defensive systems to be readied. Attack? By whom? Apocalypse mused, his gaze remaining fixed on the view beyond the bridge viewport, and Red Skull tapped a control on his belt, causing an image of the area as seen from above to appear on one of the smart panes, an image overlaid with vector lines. The attackers are disorganized, but they are moving on 3 axes. He explained. The first group is moving to intercept us directly while the other 2 are moving in to strike us from behind. Then split our forces and let my new chariots prove their worth. Apocalypse commanded. We sie Buffalin, main hair. Apocalypse nodded, then frowned slightly. They cannot hope to stop me, yet they try nonetheless. But what do they hope to achieve? Apocalypse stood motionless for a moment, then he gave a sharp nod of decision. I will send another message. I speak to the forces massing to oppose my ascension. Apocalypse declaimed from the screen. You stand no chance against me. My army is vast, while even before my awakening, my powers were as far beyond those of mutants as mutants are beyond normal humans. Now I have power beyond even the one you call Superman. Surrender to my will now and I shall grant you the honor of serving me. Arrogant bastard. Talon growled, his claws extending slightly as he gripped the flight yoke. He does seem somewhat enamored of his own prowess. Beast noted. I wonder, though, he mentioned his awakening and an empire, how much progress has he missed, do you think? Talon blinked. What? He is splitting his forces to meet our attacks. Beast said, pointing to one of the secondary screens that had been repurposed into a tactical display. Had he accelerated instead, he could have met the first group with his full strength, then turned to attack the second, then the third, defeating them in detail. Instead, he divides his forces. I do not believe that he is fully cognizant of the realities of modern warfare. You mean? Talon prompted and Beast nodded. I mean that while he may be a great warrior, he is no soldier. His tactics will be crude and predictable, something that we can use to our advantage. Beast's fanged grin was matched by the feral one that settled on Talon's face. Message from Beast of the X-Men, sir. The Comtech called and Fury looked at her. He says that we'll be up against primitive tactics, that Apocalypse doesn't understand advanced strategies. Fury frowned. Is he sure about? No. He wouldn't have sent that unless he was sure. The bridge seemed almost silent, then Fury nodded. Link me to Genosha. A moment passed, then a holographic screen formed in front of Fury. King Marco. Director Fury. Juggernaut replied politely. How may I help S.H.I.E.L.D.? Are you aware of the new threat calling himself Apocalypse? Juggernaut nodded. My analysts are getting very concerned about his plans. I assume that you want my help taking him down. I'm calling in every favor I can afford and quite a few I can't. Fury admitted. If you can. Juggernaut held up a hand, causing Fury to stop speaking. We are coming. Move. 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 Armor staggered out of her room, yawning as she looked round. What's happening? Kent-san has asked for our aid. The silver samurai snapped and Armor jolted in shock before spinning round and darting back into her room with a cry of, "Where's my uniform? Damn it! Stryker cursed as he slammed his phone down. Problem? Trask asked, and Stryker nodded with a scowl. The Palestine situation just heated up again, multiple attacks. The FMC would be a perfect counter to this lunatic who's stolen those flying boats, but I can't extract them since the situation's gone hot again. Renegade militia, my ass. Trask tilted his head slightly as he communed with Master Mold, then he blinked. Master Mold has sliced into their command systems. Your people are facing the elite units of each army, units that have been instructed to kill your soldiers and secure DNA samples for analysis and use as a basis for cloning. Stryker blinked, then snatched up his phone. Get me Sarge. The one in Palestine. I don't like his claim of being stronger than me. Clark frowned. Clark, we both know that you have never shown your full strength. Xavier noted. I doubt that he is a true match for you, although I would recommend separating him from his supporters, just to be on the safe side. Clark nodded, then he frowned in thought. His claim. I wonder. Xavier waited silently, allowing Clark to work his way through whatever chain of logic he was following, then Clark spoke. Sinister is known for being a genius with biomanipulation, if I recall the SHIELD files correctly. What if he's infused Kryptonian QNA into Apocalypse? That would be bad. Clark finished, then he grinned. However, it also means that he now has a weakness that we know about. Kryptonite. Xavier realized and Clark nodded. I think that this could be a mission for Logan. 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 Clark confirmed with a wry grin. He always wanted to find a way to make his claws work against Kryptonians, and I have an idea. Apocalypse blinked, then a snarl briefly flashed across his face. Tapping a control on his wrist, he lifted his arm as a voice emerged from his gauntlet. Master. Mesmero, you are still guarding my old prison, are you not? Yes, my lord. Excellent. Apocalypse stated. I wish you to perform a small task. Underneath the end of the altar that held me is a small panel. Behind it should be a row of crystals. I want you to swap the two first and last crystals so that none may use that altar against me. As you command, my lord. Mesmero replied, and the link went dead. Master, that order? Sinister asked diffidently, and Apocalypse shrugged. Now that I am awake, Mesmero is no longer required. Apocalypse shrugged. I have little trust for those mortals who can twist the minds of others, especially when their power makes them immune to my control. At least he will remove that ever-cursed altar and the shield that protects its technology from me and my marked servants, meaning that I will never again be imprisoned in the sleep outside time. His sacrifice will be remembered. Sinister nodded, hiding his frown with the ease of millennia of practice. As you say, my lord. He murmured before retreating. Mesmero sighed as he dropped the phone into his pocket. Looking round, he spotted a large snake nearby and stared at it for a long moment before picking up the thermos and taking a sip of its chilled contents. As he relaxed, the snake slithered down the stairs and into the ancient underground fortress. Traveling down the center of the corridors, it made its way to the empty altar and slithered to one end of it. After several moments, it moved to the other end and wrapped its tail around a small handle. Pulling at the handle, it slid the recessed panel sideways to reveal the line of crystals, then it took the first one in its mouth and lifted it out of its setting. Outside, Mesmero opened a packet of cookies, then he froze as the ground started to shake. An instant later, he was running away from the structure as fast as he could, diving for cover in a shallow depression as a blast of energy lanced out of the entrance and into the sky, scorching everything around it. Pulling himself up, he stared at the crater that had been the once concealed archway, then he growled and pulled out his phone and quickly typed a number into it. Quicksilver. You do not know me, but I have news for you. Your father is alive, but is being controlled by the one named Apocalypse. To save him, you need to peel off the device that forces him to serve. No, I'm speaking the truth, he is participating in Apocalypse's attempt to conquer America. Because Magneto's master tried to kill me and I want revenge. Mesmero switched off the phone, then paused before extracting the battery. Throwing both parts into the crater, he turned and stalked off, heading towards civilization once more. Pietro Maximoff stared at the phone in his hands, his eyes blinking furiously, then he turned and dashed into the office building behind him. Chrome. Yes, Quicksilver. The man said, looking up from the paperwork piled on his desk. I'm heading to America, I just received word that Dad's alive. Pietro said as quickly as he could while still allowing Chrome to understand his words. I'm going to try and get him back, but it's time critical. Understood. Chrome nodded. Good luck. Pietro grinned, then he blurred away in a streak of blue and silver. Damn. Techmage mused as the blur vanished over the horizon at a multiple of the speed of sound. The enhancement really boosted him. Any idea why our powers were not increased by it? Chrome asked and Techmage nodded. He's still a teenager. We're adults. Then we shall ensure that the next generation gain access to it, that they may serve the cause better. Chrome declared as he turned his attention back to the papers and e-forms on his desk, then he sighed and rose from his chair. Prepare the plane. Sinister tapped at his phone, then walked up to his master. My lord, it is done. Mesmero is no more. Excellent. Apocalypse gloated and Sinister stepped back as his master resumed his contemplations. Fury stared at the large hollow screen floating just below the deck head. On the screen, a trio of red icons pulsated as they moved away from each other, each one aiming for a different cloud of green dots. We have an incoming communication, sir. The comms operative said as she concentrated on her console. Someone named Chrome. Put him on. Fury ordered. On, sir. This is Fury. Director Fury, I am Chrome of the Acolytes. We are incoming to aid in defeating the threat posed by Apocalypse. One of our own should already be there, I have asked him to make himself known to any agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. that he can find. Fury glanced at an updating list of meta-human assets and nodded. That would be Quicksilver, yes. It would be, yes. Chrome replied. We will be there in about 15 minutes. Fury glanced at a second screen and nodded. We have you located and agree with your ETA. Out of interest, what sort of plane is that? We managed to reverse engineer some Kryptonian technology and Techmage combined it with Iron Man's repulsor tech. While it isn't as fast as a javelin, it is more than adequate for our purposes. Understood. Fury replied. Do you have any news about what we are facing? Yes. Chrome said. Magneto is being controlled by Apocalypse's technology. Remove the technology and you can free him from Apocalypse's control. Fury looked up as a new screen activated, this one highlighting the metal bands on 4 of those who had escorted Apocalypse on his theft of the 3 ships. Thank you. He finally said. Fury out. Calm. Tell all the heroes that if they can pull off those metal bands, they should do so. Right away, sir. And someone work out a way to get those ships to ground level. Fury barked. As long as they're in the air, they can use all of their weapons. We need to get them grounded so that we can get them back. I may have an idea. Tony Stark's voice said and Fury sighed in annoyance. Tony, we'll talk later about your hacking of the helicarrier's systems, again. Now. What is this idea you have? Well, Tony began, I was worried about the repulsor technology escaping my control, so I created a way to force a shutdown of the repulsors. The devices initiate a plasma instability which propagates through the... We don't have time for technical details. Tony sighed. The repulsor lifts power down, lasting long enough to do a controlled landing. However, I only have 2 devices. Then we shall use them to take out his reserves. Fury decided. We'll try to take those 2 intact if we can. As for the Principalities, consider it collateral damage. I'm mounting the devices onto drones in order to get them into position. Tony said. But I'll need the anti-air systems suppressed. Chapter 35, Exoperantia. Chrome frowned as the airy eel battlefield swelled into view. The centerpiece of it was the helicarrier Exoperantia which was hurling out volleys of projectiles from its guns. The shells slashed into the swarms of sentinels, heroes, and military jets, but the flying heroes managed to dodge the worst of it, occasionally managing to block the shots aimed at the jets as well. Shit. Frenzy hissed. We're heading into that. For Lord Magneto. Chrome confirmed, pulling back on the yoke slightly. We need to force the ship down. Send Mist here, I will need her powers. Everyone else is to prepare to jump with the flyers providing airlift. I will open the path. Frenzy nodded as she rose from the co-pilot's seat and Chrome concentrated on piloting until Amelia Vaught entered the cockpit. I'm here, she stated. What's the plan? Magneto stood on the bow of the Exuperantia, his placid gaze taking in the battle. Occasionally, he would reach out and boost the flight of a sentinel, or move one out of the way of an attack that would have destroyed it, but otherwise he stood unmoving. A flicker of light caught his attention and he smirked slightly as Archangel swooped down to punch through the skin of one of the attacking jets, pulling out shattered equipment and sending it tumbling. We're ready. Frenzy shouted over the howling of air past the open rear ramp. Then as soon as we dive, you may proceed. Chrome called back. There isn't any other way. Mist sighed. I mean, this is the only plane we have. I would gladly trade 1,000 planes for a chance to have Lord Magneto return to us. Chrome stated. Tell everyone to jump. Mist waved then pulled herself fully into the cockpit, grabbing Chrome's shoulders as their target started to swell in front of them. Won't Magneto simply push us away? No. Chrome yelled back as he sent the plane into a slow spin. Techmage duplicated Colossus device that blocked Lord Magneto's powers, it's mounted in the cargo hold. Mist nodded, then inhaled sharply as Chrome sent the plane between a pair of sentinels. On my mark. Mark. Mist turned into vapor, pulling Chrome with her as the airflow sucked them out of the plane. Magneto blinked as an odd, yet familiar sensation registered. No. It was the lack of a sensation. Magneto spun round and looked up just in time to see the jet, traveling almost at the speed of sound, spear straight into the center of the Exuperantia, slashing deep into the hull and then exploding. Gouts of flame lanced out through the cavernous hole as well as the hatches near it, and Magneto thrust his hands out, grabbing the burning wreckage that had been the Exuperantia and guiding it towards the river in an attempt to put out the flames and save as many of his master's troops as he could. Magneto was so busy concentrating on levitating the shattered ship that he failed to notice as a sudden billow of mist crashed down onto the deck behind him, transforming into two people, one of whom promptly dropped to her knees, gasping for air. Lord Magneto! Chrome shouted as he hurled himself towards his former, and hopefully future, master, only to come to a total halt mid-air as Magneto slowly turned to face him even as the bisected ship settled into the riverbank. Ah, Chrome! Magneto said calmly. Welcome back. I assume that you are here to serve Lord Apocalypse? Or are you here to oppose him? Lord Magneto! Chrome called urgently. You are being controlled. Fight it. Magneto tilted his head slightly in thought, then sighed. You could have been one of Lord Apocalypse's greatest soldiers, what? The ship rolled and Magneto rose into the air, flying round until he spotted a giant figure levering the end of the ship up. Reaching out, he shattered the hull of the ship into spears and sent it at the figure, only for it to shrink and split into three men who flew off in different directions. An instant later, an armored figure arced through the air towards him, a figure that he couldn't detect with his power. Magneto slipped to one side as the figure arced past, then the world flashed purple and he found himself on the ground. Wah! The leaping figure landed on him and Magneto reflexively lashed out with his power, only for it to be met and countered by an identical one. Magneto looked round for the source, then he spotted it, a green-haired teenaged girl hovering over his attacker's shoulder, an attacker that he now recognized as Juggernaut in armor that he had never seen before, armor that looked semi-crystalline. Father, he's strong. Juggernaut growled and grabbed Magneto's helmet, crinkling it and pulling it off. Then Magneto felt a pair of hands flickering around his head. Damn it! They're not coming loose. Quicksilver cursed as he blurred to beyond arm's length. Juggernaut, those things on him go underneath his armor. Then let us glrrrk. Juggernaut clawed at the sentinel's hand that was wrapped around his throat, then the sentinel took off with a roar of jets, carrying the monarch of Genosha with it. With his main attacker gone, Magneto rose into the air, his gaze fixed on his youngest daughter. You are no match for me. I don't care. Polaris ground out as she struggled to restrain Magneto's power. You hurt my Father. No, Polaris. I am your father. Magneto intoned. Join with me and we shall bring about a new age, the age of apocalypse. Never. Polaris grunted as Magneto used his superior experience and power to drive her backwards, then she was slammed into the ground by Archangel. A pity, but if she will not serve, then I have no use for her. Magneto mourned as he turned away. Kill her. Archangel placed a hand against the inside of his wing and a thick-stemmed metallic feather formed, its edges glistening with visible sharpness. Raising it, Archangel swung down, only for the feather to be blocked by a pair of katanas held by a man clad in red and black. Hey readers, you didn't really think I'd let a pretty girl like that get killed, did ya? Deadpool laughed as he forced the winged warrior away from the prone teen. Hua. THS is gonna be fun. Archangel swung at Deadpool with a second blade feather, then he spun and blocked the counter-strike with his wing. The katana bounced off and Deadpool somersaulted backwards to avoid the wing slash that would have disemboweled him. I'll deal with him, readers, then I'll have me a chimichanga feast. You go and see how the others are doing with Magneto. Magneto stared at the maniacal motor-mouthed mercenary, then turned to face his daughter, ignoring the cry of alliteration. Who? From Deadpool. The object of his attention was being helped to her feet by Chrome. Surrender now and enter the service of Apocalypse, or you will die. Magneto stated. We need to get his armor off so we can pull off those control things. Polaris stated and Chrome nodded. Frenzy. Now. Magneto spun round, just in time to be sent staggering by Sabretooth slamming into him, having been hurled by Frenzy. Pumping his power into his armor, Magneto used it as a powered exoskeleton to swat the large mutant away, only to be sent staggering backwards by a roundhouse punch from Frenzy that dented his chest plate, damaging the latches that held it in place. An instant later, a magnetic force that wasn't his ripped it away and sent it slicing into the neck of a nearby sentinel, dropping it in its tracks. A moment later, the recombined Kleinstock brothers were there, punching out another nearby sentinel, then grabbing onto Magneto's cape as Chrome used his power to turn the metal of Magneto's outfit into salt, allowing it to be ripped apart almost instantly. Get off me! Magneto roared, pulsing his power so that everyone was sent flying, propelled by the interaction of their own bioelectrical fields and his magnetic field. You cannot stand against me. Compared to Lord Apocalypse, you arrgh. Pietro blurred into visibility, panting heavily but with a triumphant grin on his face as he dropped the primary control node of the control circuitry that had been controlling Magneto onto the floor. Done it. He panted. That's the demmed stuff removed. Polaris. Pietro dived to one side as Juggernaut stormed past, then he staggered over to Chrome. I'm knackered. He admitted. Let's just grab Pops and get out of here. A good plan. Chrome admitted. There is one problem, however. Pietro looked round at the mass of sentinels and ceramic golems that were surrounding them and closing in. Ah, yeah. This could be a problem. At least we will die at the side of Lord Magneto. Chrome shrugged and Pietro stared at him in horrified shock. I don't wanna die. And you shall not. A familiar voice shouted as lightning struck the sentinels and golems, blasting them away from the new arrivals. By the beard of my father. Juggernaut, what ails thy daughter? She exhausted herself trying to hold Magneto. Juggernaut rumbled as he rose to his feet, cradling Polaris gently in his arms. Then I shall help you guard her, while Sif and the warriors four deal with these soulless abominations. Thor declared. Is this guy for real? Pietro asked in bemused disbelief, then he ducked as a sentinel imploded, a humanoid figure stepping out of the burning wreckage. Ha! Lorzad shouted as he rested his staff on his shoulder. Now that was an entrance. It was adequate. Thor chuckled and Nightwing pouted. Adequate? Hey, some of us don't have mystical hammers that fire off lightning to help us, you know. Pietro shook his head in confusion. They are heroes. Swap. Nightwing threw his staff at Thor, catching the hammer in return. Both warriors used their new weapons to smash through the attacking enemies before they threw the weapons back across. You see. Thor laughed. You can have a mystical hammer that fires off lightning to help you. They're crazy. Nay, just enjoying themselves. Came a voice from behind them, causing Pietro to jump in shock. Ah! Pietro grabbed at his chest as a sword-carrying warrior lady lunged past, slicing into the leg of one of the ceramic golems. What is it with people sneaking up on me today? Deadpool blocked the slashes from Archangel's wings, then he tripped over a piece of wreckage. Oh, this looks bad. He whispered as Archangel stabbed at him with both feather swords and wings simultaneously, only for the attacks to be sent off course as an overweight armor-wearing man body slammed Archangel away. Art thou injured? Art? Deadpool asked as he flipped to his feet. Who's Art? I'm Deadpool. Ah. The insane one. The man nodded and Deadpool pouted. Why do people say that? Even the readers think I'm crazy. We can discuss this later. My name is Volstagg. The man grinned, then he lunged past Deadpool, his axe clanging as it blocked the blades aimed at Deadpool's back. Oh, it is so on. Deadpool growled, spinning his katanas as he stalked forwards. That little bluebird of happiness is gonna get plucked. Leaping forwards, Deadpool slashed down in a move that sliced open Archangel's bodysuit, leaving a bleeding gash in his chest, a gash that in the space of a few seconds, stopped bleeding and began to heal. What? Deadpool gasped. Wolverine, Sabretooth, me and now him? What it is with all the ridiculously sexy people having healing abilities? We need to remove the circuitry that controls him. Volstagg shouted. Xavier will help him to recover once we have freed him from the shackles Apocalypse hath used upon him. Ah, I can't kill him, then. Deadpool pouted, then he grinned. Time to dance. Diving forwards, Deadpool rolled so that he rose facing Archangel, then grabbed the winged man and head-butted him before kneeing him in the gut. As Archangel bent over in pain, Deadpool yanked off his hood, then sliced down to reveal his back and the metallic disc set into the small of his back, a disc that was the source of the lines of circuitry. And, pop goes the weasel. Deadpool sung off-key as he slid his fingers under the disc and yanked it away, causing Archangel to collapse onto the ground, out cold. Was that meant to happen? Hey, readers. You gotta admit, I'm cool. Who are you talking to? Check the description for the links to the author.